Good evening and welcome. Tonight we take a closer look at one of the most infamous and chilling criminal cases in American history, the story of Jeffrey Dahmer. A man whose crimes shocked the nation and whose actions left a deep mark on Milwaukee and communities far beyond. What led to his capture, and how did justice finally reach the victims he left behind? Jeffrey Dahmer was an American serial killer whose crimes unfolded over a brief but terrifying period, targeting young men, many of whom were from minority communities. Behind a seemingly normal exterior, he hid a pattern of calculated, disturbing behavior that went unnoticed for years. His crimes, ultimately discovered in 1991, revealed a horrifying reality about human vulnerability, law enforcement oversights, and the dark side of predation that can hide behind everyday appearances. Dahmer's first known murder occurred years before his arrest, beginning a series of killings that would only end when police intervention brought him to justice. His victims were often lured through social interactions in bars, clubs, or other public places. Many were young, marginalized, and vulnerable, reflecting both his personal preferences and the systemic oversight of those whose disappearances did not immediately raise alarm. Among them, a young boy named Courtroom became a tragic symbol of what might have been prevented. At just 14 years old, he managed to escape Dahmer and seek help, only to be returned to his killer by officers who failed to recognize the danger. The events of that night highlighted critical lapses in law enforcement and the consequences of bias in policing, particularly toward the gay and minority communities in Milwaukee at the time. Dahmer's arrest in 1991 marked a turning point. Police, responding to concerns about a young man he had lured, discovered evidence in Dahmer's apartment that confirmed multiple murders. The investigation revealed a disturbing collection of materials that documented the scope and planning of his crimes. The community, already traumatized by missing persons reports, finally had tangible evidence that the fears many had long harbored were tragically real. The trial, which began on January 30, 1992, became a national spectacle. Dahmer pleaded not guilty by reason of insanity, a claim the court ultimately rejected. Over 2 weeks of testimony, jurors were presented with evidence of 15 confirmed murders, and the court found him legally sane and responsible for his actions. Dahmer received 15 consecutive life sentences, totaling 957 years in prison. Wisconsin's abolition of the death penalty meant that no higher sentence could be imposed, but the sheer length of his prison terms symbolized society's judgment and condemnation. While in prison, Dahmer's behavior continued to draw attention. He declared himself a born-again Christian and was baptized by a local preacher, an attempt at personal transformation that sparked debate about the nature of remorse and rehabilitation. Experts and observers questioned whether Dahmer was capable of genuine empathy or whether his expressions of regret were more about self-preservation than true remorse for his victims. Even in incarceration, he remained a controversial figure, prompting reflection on the psychological complexities of criminal minds and the limits of understanding their inner motivations. Despite this, prison life did not afford him protection. On November 28, 1994, Dahmer was attacked by fellow inmate Christopher Scarver while performing janitorial work in the prison gym. Scarver used a blunt instrument to fatally strike Dahmer, who later died en route to the hospital. Another inmate, Jesse Anderson, was injured in the same attack and died shortly afterward. The motives behind the prison assault remain partially contested, but they underscore the continued consequences of Dahmer's actions and the racial and social dynamics within correctional institutions. The Dahmer case also shed light on law enforcement failures. The police response to Courtroom's escape and subsequent return to Dahmer remains one of the most criticized aspects of the story. Officers dismissed the concerns of bystanders, failed to investigate evidence at Dahmer's residence, and ultimately allowed a young life to be lost. Though some officers faced temporary disciplinary measures, the broader lesson about accountability and sensitivity to vulnerable communities lingered. This episode sparked widespread discussion about bias, procedural negligence, and the importance of training officers to recognize warning signs before tragedy occurs. Dahmer's method of blending into social environments contributed to his evasion. Described by acquaintances as polite, well-groomed, and even personable, He leveraged appearances that belied his violent tendencies. Many who interacted with him in public spaces never suspected the danger he posed. This halo effect of outward normalcy allowed him to operate without detection, raising questions about how communities assess risk and trust. The contrast between his demeanor and the severity of his crimes continues to fascinate psychologists, law enforcement professionals, and the public alike. Public reaction to Dahmer's crimes reflected a mix of horror, sorrow, and contemplation. There was profound empathy for his victims and their families, whose lives were irrevocably changed. At the same time, observers questioned whether Dahmer's expressions of remorse could ever be genuine, reflecting deep skepticism about the capacity for empathy in such individuals. Criticism of law enforcement and prison management also emerged, highlighting the need for accountability in institutions meant to protect citizens and maintain justice. The case also prompted broader reflections on societal ethics. Many recognized the vulnerabilities of marginalized communities, particularly young men who were gay or from minority backgrounds. Dahmer's selection of victims exposed patterns of neglect and systemic bias that allowed predators to exploit social blind spots. Communities were forced to confront uncomfortable truths about prejudice, oversight, and the assumptions that shape both social interactions and institutional responses. The lasting impact of the Dahmer case continues to influence discussions on criminal justice, psychological profiling, and victim advocacy. His crimes revealed gaps in detection and prevention, underscoring the importance of vigilance, community awareness, and institutional responsibility. The story is a stark reminder of the consequences of underestimating warning signs and the critical need to protect vulnerable populations. It also serves as a reflection on human behavior, challenging society to examine the factors that allow such crimes to occur and persist unnoticed. In many ways, the Jeffrey Dahmer story is not just about the crimes themselves, but about the ripple effects across society. It forces us to question how justice is administered, how communities respond to danger, and how empathy and vigilance can prevent future tragedies. While Dahmer is no longer alive, the ethical, social, and psychological lessons from his actions remain potent and enduring. The victims' memories are central to this reflection, reminding us of lives cut short and the enduring responsibility of society to protect its members. As we look back on the timeline, the arrests, the trial, and the prison events, we are reminded that each decision, each oversight, can have lasting consequences. From the missed opportunities to save a young boy to the ultimate judgment of the court, the Dahmer case is a complex narrative of crime, accountability, and societal introspection. It is a story that challenges us to think critically about human behavior, law enforcement, and the structures that uphold justice. In the end, the Dahmer case leaves us with difficult but necessary questions. How can communities better protect their most vulnerable members? How can law enforcement be trained to respond with both competence and compassion? And what does true remorse look like in the context of crimes so profound and devastating? These are questions that remain relevant today, echoing far beyond Milwaukee in the early 1990s. What do you think about this case? Share your thoughts below and don't forget to like and subscribe so we can uncover more stories together. This content is compiled and analyzed based on publicly available information and open discussions.